Marcus Bennett was a dreamer, a creator, and above all, an artist with a story to tell. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, Marcus found beauty where others saw none. His sketchbook was his sanctuary, filled with vibrant depictions of life as he saw it, raw, powerful, and deeply personal. Each stroke of his brush carried the echoes of his ancestors, the rhythm of his culture, and the struggles and triumphs of his community. Art was not just a hobby for Marcus, it was his purpose. Yet, in the world of high-end galleries and glittering exhibitions, purpose often took a backseat to pedigree. At 28, Marcus was still trying to break into the exclusive art world. He had spent years perfecting his craft, experimenting with mixed media, bold colors, and abstract forms that blended modern expression with traditional African motifs. His pieces told stories of resilience and hope, but gallery doors remained firmly shut. One rainy afternoon, with his portfolio tucked under his arm, Marcus entered the grandiose Bellamy Gallery. The space was everything he'd imagined: gleaming floors, walls adorned with carefully curated pieces, and an air of exclusivity that was almost suffocating. Behind the polished desk sat Victoria Hayes, the gallery's owner. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her sharp features exuding authority. Victoria was the gatekeeper to a world Marcus desperately wanted to be part of, and he knew this was his moment to shine. "Good afternoon," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm Marcus Bennett, an artist. I was wondering if you'd take a look at my work." Victoria glanced up from her paperwork, her piercing gaze scanning Marcus from head to toe. Her lips curved into a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course," she said coolly, extending a manicured hand for his portfolio. As she flipped through his pieces, Marcus watched her face intently, searching for any flicker of appreciation. His paintings were bold and unapologetic, vivid abstracts interwoven with cultural symbolism. Each one told a story, a celebration of life, a protest against injustice, or a tribute to heritage. Victoria snapped the portfolio shut and placed it on the desk with a deliberate thud. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her tone clipped, "your work is interesting. But it's not the type of thing our clients are looking for." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "May I ask why?" he said, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her expression one of practiced indifference. "Our clientele expects sophistication and refinement. This," she gestured vaguely at the portfolio, "is more raw. Unpolished. It might appeal to certain audiences, but it doesn't align with the image of Bellamy Gallery." Her words stung, but it was the way she said them, dismissive, almost patronizing, that cut the deepest. Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, forcing himself to stay composed. "I see," he said quietly. "Thank you for your time." As he turned to leave, Victoria added, almost as an afterthought, "Have you considered showcasing your work in community art fairs? They might be a better fit for your style." Marcus paused at the door, her words echoing in his mind. Without looking back, he stepped into the rain-soaked streets, his portfolio feeling heavier than before. That evening, Marcus sat in his small studio apartment, surrounded by his canvases. Each one was a piece of his soul, and yet, the world seemed determined to overlook him. The rejection was not new, but it was no less painful. He thought of his mother, who had always encouraged him to pursue his passion, and his late grandmother, who had told him stories of their ancestors' resilience. "They didn't give up," she'd said. "Neither will you." Taking a deep breath, Marcus made a decision. He would not let one person's opinion define his worth. If the traditional art world wouldn't accept him, he would carve his own path. Pulling out his sketchbook, Marcus began sketching a new piece. This one was unlike anything he'd done before, a defiant, vibrant explosion of color and form that symbolized his determination to rise above. As the rain pattered against the window, Marcus worked late into the night, his resolve growing with each stroke of his brush. This was just the beginning. Marcus's decision to push forward proved to be the spark he needed. Over the next few months, he dedicated himself to his craft with a newfound intensity. His small apartment became both his sanctuary and studio, where he immersed himself in his art, each piece reflecting his journey from rejection to determination. But despite his relentless work ethic, the galleries still refused to take notice. It wasn't until he stumbled upon an online art competition that things began to change. The competition was open to artists from all over the world, offering the winner a chance to have their work displayed in a prestigious gallery. With nothing to lose, Marcus decided to enter, using a pseudonym to keep his identity hidden. He carefully selected one of his most daring pieces, a large, dynamic canvas that represented the fusion of African culture with futuristic concepts, vivid colors swirling in chaotic harmony, symbolizing the unbreakable bond between the past and the future. He titled it Resilience Rising. After submitting his piece, Marcus didn't think much about it. He focused on his work and let the world continue to ignore him. However, weeks later, he received an email that would change his life. The subject line simply read, "Congratulations, Marcus Bennett, your art has won." At first, he thought it was a mistake. Surely, this couldn't be true. He opened the email, and his eyes widened as he read the words. His piece had not only won the competition, but it had caught the attention of a wealthy art collector named Robert Sinclair, who had purchased it for an astronomical sum. Sinclair, known for his interest in unique, thought-provoking art, had made the purchase without even knowing the artist's identity. The media soon picked up the story, eager to cover the mysterious artist whose work was being hailed as groundbreaking. Speculation swirled about who Marcus might be. Some assumed he was an up-and-coming young artist from a prestigious school, others believed he was a long-established artist, trying to reinvent his style. The anonymity surrounding his identity only added to the allure. Marcus couldn't believe what was happening. His art was now being talked about on art blogs, social media platforms, and even in mainstream news outlets. But, as his fame began to grow, Marcus remained careful to keep his identity under wraps. He was determined to see how far he could go without relying on his name. It was the art that mattered, not the artist behind it. The competition's prize money gave Marcus a comfortable financial cushion, but more importantly, it provided him with the resources to take his career to the next level. He hired an agent, Laura Stevens, who was known for her work with high-profile clients. She immediately saw the potential in Marcus and began negotiating higher prices for his work. Within weeks, his pieces were being sold at a pace that he had never imagined. His style, vivid, bold, and full of cultural resonance, struck a chord with collectors and art enthusiasts around the world. From New York to Paris, galleries began inquiring about showcasing his work. Then came the day Marcus's art ended up in a place he never could have anticipated, Victoria Hayes's Bellamy Gallery. He had never expected to be connected to the very gallery owner who had rejected him. But fate, as it often does, has a way of circling back. Marcus's painting, Echoes of the Past, was displayed in the gallery's most prestigious section. Victoria had no idea that it was the same artist she had once dismissed. Instead, she praised it, declaring it a masterpiece and labeling it a bold reinterpretation of African heritage through a modern lens. Her words echoed through the art world. The gallery's social media accounts exploded with praise for the work, and collectors began fighting for the chance to buy it. At the time, Victoria didn't know that the artist she had unknowingly showcased was none other than Marcus Bennett, the very artist she had belittled months earlier. For Marcus, it was a bittersweet moment. While his work was finally being recognized, he couldn't help but remember her dismissive words. He had come a long way since that first meeting at Bellamy Gallery. And now, the same gallery that had rejected him was unknowingly championing his art as the next big thing. The media was abuzz with the mysterious artist's success. What started as an anonymous victory was now becoming a global phenomenon. Yet, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. The next step was something much more personal, and much more satisfying. It was time to reveal who he truly was. The world was on the edge of discovering the identity of the artist behind the stunning works that had captivated the art world. And Marcus was ready to take his rightful place at the top. The art world, with its polished walls and refined sensibilities, had never seen anyone like Marcus Bennett. As the days went by, his works continued to soar in value and popularity. What had started as an unexpected victory in an online competition was now a cultural movement. Marcus's pieces were sought after by collectors and galleries around the world, but he was careful not to reveal too much about himself. His pseudonym became a symbol of mystery, fueling the public's fascination even further. Marcus's agent, Laura Stevens, was instrumental in managing this newfound fame. She had a knack for high-stakes negotiations, and as Marcus's art began to draw attention, she capitalized on the opportunity. She was aggressive in promoting his work, securing gallery exhibitions in prestigious locations from New York to London. But through it all, Marcus remained focused on his art, not the celebrity. Laura had one key rule for Marcus: no public appearances. She knew that the mystery of the artist only added to his allure. The anonymity created an aura of reverence around his work, allowing people to appreciate the pieces for their intrinsic value, rather than the artist's background or persona. Marcus agreed with her strategy, allowing his work to speak for itself. However, as much as Marcus enjoyed the recognition, there was one particular aspect that began to gnaw at him: the possibility of being misunderstood. His art wasn't about fame or money. It was about stories of his ancestors, stories of survival and strength, and stories of the world he envisioned. But with the rush of high-profile exhibitions and endless media interviews, the deeper meanings of his work were often overlooked. As Marcus spent more time in the art world spotlight, he started to feel the weight of this dual identity: the artist whose works were adored by critics, and the man who had fought to be seen and heard in a society that often ignored his voice. He knew that it was only a matter of time before the public would demand to know the true identity of the elusive artist behind the masterpieces. Meanwhile, Victoria Hayes, the owner of Bellamy Gallery, had no idea who she was dealing with. She had sold Marcus's painting to a collector, completely unaware that the artist behind the now-renowned pieces was the very same person she had once dismissed. Her gallery was buzzing with excitement over echoes of the past, which had become one of their most talked-about exhibits. Critics praised its complexity and the unique fusion of contemporary styles with deep cultural significance. Victoria began to take note of the growing media attention surrounding the mysterious artist's works. One afternoon, Victoria was hosting a private event for a select group of high-profile collectors. As the guests milled about, admiring the latest works, a young curator approached her. "Victoria, you should take a look at this," the curator said, holding up a tablet displaying a news article. Victoria glanced at the screen, frowning slightly as she read the headline: "The unknown artist who took the art world by storm, who is Marcus Bennett?" The article went on to discuss the rapid rise of a previously unknown artist whose works were now fetching millions at auction. The piece mentioned echoes of the past being displayed at Bellamy Gallery and highlighted the growing speculation about the identity of the artist. For the first time, Victoria's curiosity piqued. She knew that the artist behind these pieces had to be someone of great talent, but she hadn't realized just how significant Marcus's work had become. In fact, she had sold the piece without even considering who the artist was. Now, as the article continued to circulate, her realization hit her hard. Could it be possible that the same artist she had dismissed months ago was the one behind these works? Victoria quickly shifted into professional mode, brushing aside her rising discomfort. The event was still going smoothly, and the wealthy patrons were eager to purchase more pieces. But in the back of her mind, the question lingered. Who was Marcus Bennett? Back in his studio, Marcus could sense the momentum building. His art had transcended the typical boundaries of the art world; it was now a global conversation. His work had been featured in major magazines and blogs, and his pieces were displayed in the homes of some of the most influential people in the world. Despite his success, Marcus felt an uneasy pull. He was still anonymous, and while that had worked for a while, he knew it was time to step out of the shadows. It wasn't about the fame for him, it was about the recognition of the stories he had worked so hard to tell. His art was an expression of his identity, of his history, and of the future he hoped to create. But there was another aspect that Marcus couldn't ignore: he was finally in a position to do something about the systemic issues he had faced as a black artist. He could use his newfound platform to make a change. A decision had been growing in Marcus's mind for some time now, and it was one that would reshape his career and the art world as a whole. He would reveal his identity, not for the attention, but for the power of his story. Marcus was determined to create a space in the art world where artists like him could thrive, where their voices wouldn't be ignored or diminished. The art world was a strange place. It was built on connections, influence, and a certain set of unspoken rules. As an outsider, Marcus had always known he would have to fight for his place. But now, with his art commanding the attention of the world, he had the leverage he needed. The moment Marcus decided to reveal himself, he knew it would be a dramatic one. He couldn't just let his identity slip out, no, it had to be a bold declaration. The world had to understand that he wasn't just a product of the system, he was redefining it. As the media frenzy continued to build, Marcus, with Lara's help, began preparing for the perfect moment. He would unveil his identity at an upcoming art exhibition, one that was sure to attract a crowd of collectors, critics, and influencers. The timing had to be precise, and the reveal would be part of a larger mission, to change the narrative around art, race, and recognition. Marcus wasn't just going to be an artist, he was going to be a force for change in the industry. The pieces were all falling into place. Marcus was no longer just an artist with a story. He was about to become a living legend, one who would change the art world forever. The night of the exhibition had finally arrived. It was being held at one of the most prestigious venues in New York City, the Vanguard Art Gallery, known for showcasing some of the finest contemporary art in the world. The air was thick with excitement, anticipation, and the smell of expensive champagne. The crowd, an eclectic mix of collectors, critics, influencers, and art enthusiasts, had gathered to view the latest pieces from emerging artists. But this exhibition was different. It wasn't just about the art on display, it was about the artist who had taken the world by storm. Marcus stood in the shadows, just outside the entrance, looking at the flurry of activity inside. This was the moment he had been waiting for. For months, he had kept his identity a secret, but now it was time to reveal who he truly was. His work had become a global sensation, but it was time for the art world to know the man behind the masterpieces. Lara Stevens, ever the strategist, had orchestrated every detail of the evening. She had arranged for a large wall to be set up in the center of the gallery, adorned with several of Marcus's most iconic works. The crowd would gather there, admiring the art, and then, when the time was right, the great reveal would take place. No one would expect it. Victoria Hayes, the owner of Bellamy Gallery, had been invited to the event. She had heard the buzz about Marcus's work and had even begun to make plans to feature his pieces in her own gallery. She didn't know it yet, but tonight she would be confronted with a powerful revelation. The same artist she had once dismissed would be standing before her, not as an unknown, but as the artist who had conquered the art world. As the evening progressed, Marcus kept a low profile, his nerves humming with anticipation. He watched from a distance as the guests admired his pieces that now hung in the gallery as masterpieces, hailed for their depth, vibrancy, and historical significance. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. These were the works that had been dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood just a few months ago. Now, they were symbols of his hard work, his struggle, and his undeniable talent. The crowd continued to mill around, sipping their drinks, chatting, and marveling at the artwork. Marcus could see the whispers beginning to circulate. Who is this artist? Where did he come from? His work is unlike anything I've seen before. Victoria, who had just arrived, moved through the gallery with a practiced air of confidence. She was unaware that her gallery had become a key part of this evening's events. Her eye stopped on one of Marcus's pieces, a large canvas titled The Bridge Between, which depicted a powerful image of a bridge made of intertwined hands, each representing a different race, culture, and heritage. It was a striking image, bold, emotional, and entirely unique. She was immediately captivated by the piece. Incredible, she whispered to herself, standing before it. She had no idea that this painting was one of Marcus's, one of the works she had once looked down on as unrefined. Now, as she gazed at it, she saw it for what it truly was, a masterpiece that blended cultural depth with contemporary flair. The crowd continued to gather around the centerpiece of the exhibition. The lights dimmed slightly, and Lara, standing at the front, took the microphone. The room fell silent. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lara began, her voice steady and authoritative, "we are honored tonight to present to you the artist behind these extraordinary works." For months, his identity has remained a mystery, but tonight, that mystery is about to be solved. The room went still with anticipation. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. The time had come. With a dramatic flourish, Lara pulled back a velvet curtain, revealing a large projection screen. The image on the screen was a video, a personal message from Marcus himself. It began with a slow zoom in on his face, the artist finally coming into full view. The crowd gasped, their eyes wide with surprise. On screen, Marcus spoke softly, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "Hello, everyone. I am Marcus Bennett. I've spent years creating the works you've admired tonight, and now I stand before you to reveal not just my name, but my story." The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone knew who he was now. The mystery that had surrounded his identity was no more. As an artist, Marcus continued, "My work has always been about more than just painting. It's about telling the stories of my heritage, my community, and the struggles we face every day. My pieces are a reflection of my journey, and they carry the weight of generations before me." The crowd was entranced. They were listening to an artist speak not just about his craft, but about his very soul. His voice resonated with truth, with authenticity. Victoria stood frozen, her heart racing. She had known that Marcus's work was extraordinary, but hearing him speak, seeing the passion in his eyes, made her realize just how wrong she had been. She had underestimated him, dismissed him without ever truly understanding the power of his vision. "Tonight," Marcus said, "I reveal myself not to claim fame, but to claim the space that my art, and the art of countless other Black artists, deserves. The world has ignored us for far too long. But no more." The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation for the artist who had come from nothing to claim his place among the greats. Victoria stood in the back of the room, her face flushed with embarrassment. She had no idea how to react. Her feelings were a mix of awe and humiliation. The artist she had once mocked was now a global sensation, and she had been part of that very journey, unknowingly showcasing his work at her gallery. But Marcus wasn't interested in making her feel bad. As he looked out over the crowd, he understood that his journey was about more than proving anyone wrong. It was about showing the world that art, real art, could transcend the biases and prejudices that had held so many back. As the applause continued, Marcus caught sight of Victoria. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the tension between them hung in the air. Victoria nodded, acknowledging him. It was a silent admission, she now recognized his genius, and, perhaps more importantly, she had learned to respect him as an artist. Tonight was Marcus's moment. It was the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and defiance. He had made it. And the world would never forget his name. The aftermath of Marcus's reveal was nothing short of explosive. The art world, the media, and the public at large were all buzzing about the revelation of his identity. The mystery of the anonymous artist was gone, and now the world could place a name to the works they had come to admire. Marcus Bennett was not just an artist, he was a movement, a symbol of resilience, cultural pride, and artistic excellence. For a while, the world seemed to focus solely on his story, how a Black artist had risen from obscurity to become one of the most celebrated figures in contemporary art. Every interview, every article, every feature seemed to focus on his dramatic ascent from the margins of the art world to its center stage. But Marcus, ever the artist first and foremost, was determined not to let the narrative shift away from the work itself. He understood the importance of his story, especially to those who had followed his journey from the very beginning. His rise wasn't just about him, it was about all the other artists who had been ignored or rejected simply because they didn't fit a certain mold. He couldn't be the only one to succeed. He had to ensure that the doors that had been slammed in his face were open for others. As the media coverage of his identity continued to swirl, Marcus took a step back from the spotlight. He didn't want to become a mere symbol of triumph, he wanted to be a catalyst for change in the art world. The pressure of being seen as a beacon of success for an entire community weighed heavily on him, but Marcus embraced it. This wasn't just about personal glory, it was about creating a legacy. In the weeks following the reveal, Marcus's schedule became a whirlwind of interviews, gallery openings, and speaking engagements. He found himself constantly at the center of conversations about art, race, and representation. But through it all, he remained grounded, refusing to let the frenzy overshadow the work he was passionate about. He would not be defined by the headlines, his art would speak for itself. One evening, as he sat in his studio reflecting on the rapid changes in his life, he received an unexpected call from Victoria Hayes. The once dismissive gallery owner, now humbled by her mistake, wanted to meet with him. "Marcus, I want to apologize," Victoria said, her voice tinged with genuine regret. "I've been thinking about everything, how I treated you, how I dismissed your work without ever truly understanding it. I want to make things right. I hope we can have an honest conversation about how I can support you moving forward." Marcus took a deep breath. He had expected her call, he knew the art world's politics all too well. But hearing the sincerity in her voice made him pause. "I appreciate the apology, Victoria. But I need to be clear with you. This isn't just about me. It's about what my art represents, and the doors that need to be opened for other artists like me." "I understand," Victoria replied, the sincerity in her tone unwavering. "That's why I want to help. I've seen what you've done, and I see the vision you have. I want to be part of that change." Marcus took a moment before responding. "I have an idea, Victoria. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. I'm considering starting my own gallery, one that prioritizes artists who have been overlooked by the mainstream. It won't just be about showcasing art, it will be about creating a space where all voices are heard." Victoria hesitated for a moment, then spoke with renewed determination. "If you're serious about it, Marcus, I'll help you. I want to be part of that legacy. I want to help create a space where art is celebrated for its truth, not just its market value." In that moment, Marcus knew that this was the turning point he had been waiting for. It wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about something greater, a chance to reshape the art world and provide opportunities for artists who had been marginalized for too long. The conversation set the wheels in motion. Marcus began to plan the foundation of his new gallery, one that would focus on underrepresented voices and challenge the traditional art market's narrow focus on profit. He envisioned a space where artists from all walks of life could display their work, regardless of their race, gender, or socioeconomic background. It would be a place of radical inclusivity, where the true value of art was determined by its emotional and cultural impact, not by its commercial appeal. Victoria, despite her earlier misjudgments, was eager to help. She saw this as a chance to redeem herself, to be a part of something that would make a real difference in the art world. She offered to invest in the project and even suggested that Marcus use her gallery's network to introduce his vision to other artists and potential patrons. As the idea for the new gallery took shape, Marcus began reaching out to artists he admired, those who had faced rejection or exploitation in the past. He wanted to build a community, not just a gallery. This was about creating a network of support, a family of artists who would uplift each other and challenge the conventions of the art world. But even as his plans for the gallery began to gain traction, Marcus remained cautious. He had witnessed firsthand the ways in which people in positions of power could manipulate or co-opt a movement. He wasn't going to let that happen to his vision. He was determined to keep the gallery true to its original mission, to amplify the voices of artists who had been silenced for far too long. One evening, as Marcus was preparing for another interview, Laura Stevens called him with some surprising news. "Marcus, I've been talking to some people in the industry," she said, "and I've heard whispers. There's talk of a major buyout from a major player in the art world. They want to offer you a huge sum for your collection, for everything you've done. Marcus paused, taking in the offer. It was tempting. He had already made millions from the sale of his art, and a buyout would secure his financial future indefinitely. But the decision wasn't so simple. He had something far more valuable in mind than just money. I'm not interested, he replied. I don't want to be part of the system that's kept artists like me down. I'm going to do things my way. The choice was clear. Marcus wasn't just in this for personal gain, he was in it for the future of art, for the artists who would follow in his footsteps. The vision for his new gallery was growing clearer with every passing day, and Marcus knew that this was his true calling, not just to be an artist, but to change the world of art itself. As the months went by, the foundation of the gallery began to take shape. Marcus was no longer just an artist, he was becoming a leader, a mentor to young artists who had once been told their work wasn't valuable, their voices weren't important. He had risen above the expectations placed on him by the world, and now he was using his platform to lift others up. The story of Marcus Bennett was far from over. His journey had only just begun. As Marcus's gallery plans began to take shape, it became clear that his growing influence in the art world was not just about his own success, but about igniting change on a much larger scale. His passion to create a space for underrepresented artists had begun to draw attention, both positive and negative. But amidst the excitement, the art world's elites were starting to take notice, particularly the major players who controlled the commercial art market. For months, rumors had swirled about Marcus's gallery plans, with whispers of a potential buyout. Now, those whispers had turned into real conversations. One of the largest art conglomerates in the world, Horizon Arts, had taken a particular interest in Marcus's rise and the revolutionary idea he was trying to bring to life. Horizon Arts was a well-established powerhouse with connections to galleries across the globe, and their business was built on acquiring and controlling the top-tier artists. They had the resources, the infrastructure, and the network to turn Marcus's art into a mainstream commodity. But their offer, as Marcus soon discovered, wasn't about supporting his vision, it was about harnessing his success for their own profit. One evening, Laura Stevens, who had become both a close confidant and business advisor to Marcus, called him with alarming news. She had just returned from a meeting with Horizon's representatives, and the deal they were offering was tempting, very tempting. They're offering you a huge sum, Marcus, Laura explained over the phone. The kind of money you could use to build your gallery in a way that no one could have imagined. They want to buy your entire collection, your intellectual property, and even get involved in the day-to-day operations of your gallery. They're offering millions. Marcus sat back in his chair, staring out at the skyline of New York, his mind racing. This was the kind of deal that many artists only dreamt of, the kind of money that could secure not just his future, but the futures of the artists he planned to support. Horizon was offering him financial stability and a guaranteed place in the art world's upper echelons. The temptation was real. But as he listened to Lara's words, something gnawed at him. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle. What's the catch? Marcus asked. They want to control the brand, Lara replied, carefully choosing her words. They'd want you to align your vision with their corporate agenda. The whole concept of underrepresented artists, the inclusivity, it's not exactly their focus. They're looking for something more, commercial. Marcus's heart sank. He had always known this day might come, the day when his vision would be tested by the demands of big money. Horizon wasn't interested in changing the art world, they were interested in exploiting it. They saw Marcus as a valuable commodity, not a revolutionary force. I can't do that, Lara, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil he felt inside. This gallery, my vision, it's not just about making money. It's about creating a space where artists like me, artists who have been excluded for so long, can thrive on their own terms. I won't let that be compromised. Lara was silent for a moment. She had expected this answer, but she also knew how difficult it would be to turn down an offer of this magnitude. I understand, she said finally. But Marcus, this isn't going to be easy. You're about to go up against some powerful forces. They won't let you walk away without a fight. I'm not backing down, Marcus replied firmly. I've spent my entire career fighting for what I believe in. I'm not going to sell out now. I'm going to build something that lasts, not just for me, but for the artists who need a voice. The decision was made. Marcus knew that this was his moment to make a stand, to prove that he wasn't just another artist playing the game. He was going to do things his way, on his terms. In the days that followed, Marcus reached out to several key investors who shared his vision. He began to put the pieces in place to fund his gallery without relying on the corporate world's approval. He knew it would take time and persistence, but he had already come this far by staying true to his values, and he wasn't about to change now. But Horizon wasn't about to let go of such a lucrative opportunity so easily. They made one last attempt to win Marcus over, sending an emissary to meet with him in person. The representative, a suave and polished executive named Gerald Piers, flew in from London to offer Marcus a personal pitch. Mr. Bennett, Gerald began, his tone smooth and persuasive, I understand your concerns. But think about what we can achieve together. Horizon Arts has access to markets and patrons all over the world. Your gallery could become a global phenomenon. Imagine the impact you could have, not just on the art world, but on society as a whole. You'll have the resources to make a difference, more than you ever could on your own. Marcus listened, but his resolve only hardened. He had heard this kind of talk before. It was the same pitch used to co-opt the movements of the past, to absorb them into the status quo and strip them of their revolutionary power. I appreciate your offer, Mr. Piers, Marcus said calmly, but I'm not interested. What I'm building isn't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. Gerald's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. I respect your decision, Mr. Bennett. But remember, opportunities like this don't come around every day. You're turning down a chance to secure your legacy. Marcus met his gaze squarely. My legacy is not for sale. My vision, my art, and my gallery are not something I'll let you commodify. The legacy I'm building is one where artists have the freedom to express themselves without fear of exploitation. With that, Gerald's demeanor shifted. He stood, extending his hand to Marcus. Well, I must say, you have guts. I'll give you that. But don't say I didn't warn you. As the meeting came to an end, Marcus felt a surge of relief. It wasn't just about rejecting the buyout, it was about reclaiming his power. He had faced down the forces of big business and won, and now he was free to pursue his dream on his own terms. In the following weeks, Marcus's decision sent shockwaves through the art world. Critics, collectors, and industry insiders were all talking about his bold refusal to be co-opted by the establishment. Many praised him for his integrity, while others questioned his decision. But one thing was clear, Marcus Bennett was no longer just an artist. He was a leader, a symbol of the power of independent thought, and the courage to stay true to one's vision, no matter the cost. The foundations of his gallery continued to grow. With the support of his fellow artists and a handful of dedicated investors who believed in his vision, Marcus was on the verge of creating something that would change the art world forever. Victoria Hayes, now a partner in his gallery venture, came to him with an idea. Marcus, she said one day, what if we made this gallery not just a space for art, but a platform for change? What if we used it to amplify the voices of those who have been silenced by the system? Marcus smiled, his mind racing with possibilities. This was what he had always dreamed of, a space where art and activism could merge, where the power of creativity could challenge the status quo and empower marginalized communities. Together, they began to lay the groundwork for something truly revolutionary, an art gallery that was as much a statement of resistance as it was a celebration of artistic brilliance. And Marcus knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The future he was creating was one where artists were free to tell their own stories, on their own terms, without compromise. Years passed, and Marcus Bennett's name became synonymous with the transformative power of art. What had begun as a dream to create a space for underrepresented artists had grown into something far greater than he had ever imagined. His gallery, now a global institution, had reshaped the very fabric of the art world. It was no longer just a place to view art, it was a movement, a cultural hub where the voices of marginalized artists could be heard loud and clear. The gallery became a symbol of hope for countless young artists who had once felt the sting of rejection, who had been told their work wasn't good enough because it didn't conform to the industry's rigid standards. Artists who had long been overlooked for their race, gender, or social status now found a platform to showcase their talents. The gallery wasn't just a business, it was a revolution. Marcus often found himself reflecting on his journey. The road had been long, filled with setbacks, moments of doubt, and fierce opposition from the powers that controlled the art market. But it had also been filled with triumphs, the quiet victories of artists who had gained the recognition they deserved, and the loud celebrations of works that had changed the cultural landscape. The gallery was thriving, but Marcus's true pride came from the stories of the artists who had flourished within its walls. It wasn't about the wealth he had accumulated, nor the fame he had achieved. It was about the lives he had touched, the careers he had helped build, and the barriers he had broken down. His work had proven that art was not a commodity to be bought and sold, it was a vehicle for change, a way to tell the stories that needed to be told, and a means to elevate voices that had been silenced for far too long. On a warm summer evening, as Marcus stood in the gallery's main hall, he watched a young artist, a woman from a small town in the south, standing proudly beside her painting. The piece was bold, raw, and unflinching, a reflection of her own journey through adversity. She had never imagined her work would be on display in such a prestigious gallery, but here she was, her piece admired by collectors and critics alike. Marcus knew that this was the essence of his mission, to provide a platform where artists could create freely and be recognized for the true value of their work, not for the market's fleeting trends. Victoria Hayes, now a close collaborator and trusted friend, approached him as the crowd marveled at the exhibition. "Marcus, do you ever stop and think about how far we've come?" she asked, her voice filled with awe as she looked around the room. Marcus smiled, his eyes scanning the gallery. "I try not to think about it too much. If I do, I might miss what's coming next." The gallery had evolved beyond just a physical space, it had become a cultural movement. It wasn't just about exhibiting art. It was about creating dialogues, sparking change, and empowering those who had long been pushed to the margins. The influence of the gallery had spread to major art fairs, global exhibitions, and even academic institutions, where Marcus's work and philosophy were now being studied. The young artist from the South, whose painting was now part of the gallery's collection, had been one of many who had gained confidence and recognition through Marcus's vision. Her work had sparked a new conversation on race, identity, and heritage, topics that had been long neglected by the mainstream art world. It was the kind of work that challenged viewers to look beyond the surface and engage with the deeper, often uncomfortable truths of society. And it was exactly the kind of work Marcus had always wanted to support. Marcus's commitment to mentorship had become a cornerstone of the gallery's success. He wasn't just an art collector or a business mogul, he was a guide, a mentor, and an advocate for the next generation. His advice, wisdom, and personal experience were invaluable to the artists who came to him for guidance. He would often spend hours in his office, meeting with young artists, talking to them about their struggles, their dreams, and their art. The gallery had become a place of learning, a space where new ideas could be tested and nurtured, where emerging artists could grow without fear of being told they didn't belong. One of the most profound moments of Marcus's life came during a conversation with a young artist named Ella, who had been struggling to find her voice. She was a painter, and her work was abstract and deeply emotional, yet it didn't fit into the conventional art world's definition of successful. When Marcus first met Ella, she was full of doubt, unsure if her work was even worthy of being seen. But under his guidance, she found her voice, her work gained the recognition it deserved, and soon her pieces were showcased in the gallery. One evening, after her first major exhibition, Ella approached Marcus with a look of gratitude in her eyes. "I don't think I ever would have believed in myself without you," she said. "I was afraid my work was too different, that it wouldn't fit. But you gave me the confidence to keep going." Marcus smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Ella, your work is exactly what this gallery is about. It's about breaking the rules, challenging expectations, and creating something that speaks your truth. Ella nodded, a tear in her eye. You changed my life. And because of that, I can change others' lives too. Marcus knew then that this was the true legacy of his gallery, the artists it had nurtured, the stories it had shared, and the movement it had sparked. It wasn't just about the art itself, it was about the lives that art touched, the conversations it started, and the walls it had torn down. Years later, as Marcus sat in his office, now surrounded by his own extensive collection of work by artists from all walks of life, he reflected on how far he had come. The gallery was thriving, but his heart was still tied to the mission that had started it all. The work was never finished, and the challenges were ever present. There were still barriers to break, still voices that needed to be amplified, and still countless stories that had yet to be told. And so, as he looked out over the bustling city streets, Marcus made a promise to himself. The legacy he had built wasn't just for him, it was for every artist who had ever been told they didn't belong. It was for every voice that had been silenced, every story that had been ignored. His work wasn't just about changing the art world, it was about changing the world itself. And as long as the gallery stood, as long as his name was attached to this movement, Marcus knew that the work would continue, that the doors he had opened would remain wide for the next generation of artists to walk through. The future was bright, and it was full of possibility.